Welcome to Supernatural Circumstances, the podcast where I take you down the rabbit hole into the fantastic world of the strange, the paranormal, and the unknown. I'm Morgan Knudsen. Come along with me on this week's adventure, and guys, we are headed on a pretty crazy adventure. This week, we are welcoming author Kenney W. Irish, and for those who aren't aware of him, he is a cryptozoologist and musician. Seems like there's a few of those, like Lyle Blackbird and people like that. But he's had a lifelong love of folklore, legends, monsters, UFO stories, you name it. He's a fellow Beyond the Fray publishing author, as I am myself. And in 2021 released American Cryptids in Pursuit of Elusive Creatures. Now, he's been on tons of different shows, including my show, Haunted Hospitals. And he's come out with or is going to be coming out, I should say, with a brand new book this spring called Vikings and Pirates, Lords of Blood and the Sea. So, why do I care? Well, not only am I doing the foreword for this book, so I'm a little bit biased, but I'm also deeply related to Vikings. My last name, Knudsen, has a lineage that goes back to King Canute, who was a very famous king back in those times. And as many of you guys are probably aware, that the Vikings have a very deep, long history of critters and spirituality and all of those things. So we're going to get into all of that with Kenney, and I'm so excited. I can't wait. Let's go. Well, it is first of all, just a pleasure to finally have you on the show, because it's been, well, I mean, we've known each other online for a really long time. This needed to happen, so welcome.
Thank you. And it's kind of ironic how it happened too. With one of the books that I've got coming out this year, and reaching out to you and asking you your opinions and what your thoughts were, because I wanted different individuals to read them first, critique them, and when you said what you had said coming back, I'm like, okay, well, I know who I want to ask to put the forward together on this one. So, I mean, what are the chances of that out of everybody? What are the chances? So it's like it's supposed to happen.
Meant to be. Well, yeah, I don't believe in accidents. I think things line up for a reason. And so talk about this book a little bit, because I've just laid a little bit of the groundwork in my introduction here, but I want to hear it from you. Talk about this a bit, because it's a really fascinating read.
Okay. Yeah. I've always been fascinated and loved and been inspired. It's hard to say inspired when you're talking about mutiny, but there's reasons for it. There were definitely reasons for it, I think. And so I actually, when I started writing the book and researching and putting everything together, that was really my first taste of the real life outside of the movies and Hollywood. So putting it together, I learned a lot. So after reading everything and putting everything together, I'm so new to this subject in such a way that usually the individuals who write the books, like, they've got this vast background in it. But I was just like, I really want to learn this. And as I was researching it and learning it, I'm like, no, I want to do a book on this. And so I just did a lot of different research, and just a lot of stuff that I never even thought of, and how let's say Vikings came about, and the family inheritance, not having something necessarily for them. And then as far as like pirates taking over ships, how like it originally originated. Like, my whole thinking was, okay, there was just some people that were outcasts and they were thieves, and they found a ship, they took it. But from my studies, it turns out, okay, well, they didn't just take it. They were actually on it. They were workers who were being mistreated, and they realized, well, there's 300 of us and 30 of them. Why are we allowing them to treat us like this? So when I found that out, I was intrigued even more, and just kind of got deeper into it. So that was the main reason for putting the book together. Again, one, I don't want to say a passion, because I never had a passion for pirates or Vikings,
Right? Yeah.
but who has never not thought about, oh God, how cool would it be to be a Viking? I mean, when you see them, I mean, you see power, you see influence, you see a lot of strength. And I don't think any guy that's ever first laid eyes on a Viking was ever like, oh, no, 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 I want nothing to do with that. I mean, they might in the senses they don't want to like come face to face, but outside of that, I mean, one of the coolest looking individuals, or I shouldn't say individuals, group from history would be Vikings.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, my history it dates back to the Norse and whatnot as well, and that's one thing that I've definitely identified with over the years is the strength and versatility and adaptability and that sort of that warrior mentality that the Vikings have carried. One of my favorite Viking films, and I'm sure many listeners will probably relate to this because they'll probably be on board with this, was The 13th Warrior.
Mm.
And it was based off of Michael Crichton's book, Eaters of the Dead. And it was such a fantastic, I think, portrayal of the Viking culture. And not only that, but their mythology, their belief
Mhm.
systems, their spirituality, and their tenacity to get through some insanely hard times, even when some of those hard times sort of blend into the supernatural a little bit. Did you find that as well when you were researching?
Um, I wouldn't say anything that really was directly related. I mean, I know that there was spirituality that was definitely spoken of, but as far as outside of that, like it wasn't like part that I was really kind of going after. I kind of touch on it a little bit, but not really. It was one of those things where it's in there, but it's not something that I put a whole lot of time in looking into. However, now that you bring that up, I'm probably going to look a bit deeper into that, because that's the thing when you're doing research and you're learning all these new things, that it's just you kind of like get to that point where it's like there's so much there that you just it's like for me it's I turn into like overload. I mean, since I got in my 50s, it's like for me to retain stuff too, it's always been hard. Um but yeah, I mean, as far as and again, what let's start out with the Vikings. A lot of the reasons and the plans that they came up with in order to do what it was that they did, and I'm saying it like that in a sense because obviously I don't want to be saying what I wrote in the book necessarily, um, but to come up with the plans and the ideas and how they executed raids and different aspects like that. I was just blown away by it because I just never thought about it. It was
Yeah.
one of those things where I knew that this happened, but I never looked into what the actual reasons were, what the actual plans were, and what a lot of the strategic execution plans that they had laid out that they actually put into place. So after reading all that, again, I was just that was one of the big things when I learned how they organized raids on different lands. That was the big thing. That was, I'd
Yeah.
probably say, the when I put pen to paper, when I was like, okay, this is just really cool. And that was
Yeah.
just the beginning of it. So taking it from there, all the way to the history of it. I mean, I know I've got a lot in there talking about different metals and golds and different things like that. But the reason I left a lot of like some of it, there might be a lot of it in there, but a lot of it had to do with the time at that point in time in that chapter in that era where precious metals were great, and then it turned to silver and different things like that. So that's why there is a lot of talk about gold and treasure, but that's also
Yeah.
one of the reasons why they needed to do what they needed to do. That was part of the driving force to be able to feed themselves, take care of themselves, and be able to stay on the water too,
Yeah.
which was huge because that was their escape. That was their gateway to living in a community that wasn't governed by all these other rules, but by what they saw as fairness, not necessarily hierarchy. Now, hierarchy obviously still played a role with both pirates and Vikings. However, it was a lot more fair. The captain of the ship was paid more, but not a whole lot more. They understood that it was a community and it took all of them to make it happen. Where you look later on down the road with, let's just say, the pirates, with the whole mutiny, they had to take over the ship. a lot of it there was also survival as well. But again, to be able to say, hey, wait a minute, there's like 300 of us and there's like 30 of them. Why are we putting up with this? That also got my blood flowing in a good way, because I have no problem with hierarchy. I do have a problem with abuse of hierarchy. So,
Yeah.
and part of my day job, if you will, I'm in leadership for a really large company. So it's like fairness, taking care of the people who are
Yeah.
helping you achieve what you need to do. And a lot of people didn't have that. They weren't treated like that. So they did what they had to do. So I really respected that. And again, it just kind of got my blood flowing and going like, hey, why are they treating them like this? And well, the people that were treating them like that kind of got what they deserved.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing I think is interesting about the Viking community is that they actually started a lot in regards to different rules, different laws, equality. There's a lot in there that they accomplished very, very, very early on. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people would be really interested to understand the link with the beginnings of pirates. I know here in Canada, I don't know if you've heard of the Oak Island treasure, but that
Mhm.
has been linked to the Norse as well,
Yes.
and whatnot. And so there's a lot of mystery that goes in and around what exactly that they were doing, and again, just grounded in what they believe spiritually, grounded in what they were doing and moving, potentially moving treasure even to Canada. Um, did you want to talk a little bit about that? Like how is this all connected with the Vikings that we think about when we think about raids and
Mhm.
government and all of those types of things?
Well, I think a lot of the stuff that in many senses that they rightfully took, in my opinion, they they stashed a lot of things away, and they had to do that for a reason, obviously, because they knew they were going to be chased eventually. So they kind of had to have like these secret underground banks, if you will, vaults. And I believe, in my opinion, and I don't know, but obviously wasn't there. Kind of wish I was. I think it would be kind of fun. But in my opinion, I really think that it's everything that they did. Again, they might a lot of the time when I talk to people, they see him as, again, powerful, these big powerful beings and these powerful men. Um, but they were so much more than that. They were so
Yeah,
strategic in everything that they did, and I really think that a lot of the gold that they did hide in a lot of these different treasures, and where they would store it and potentially have areas where they would keep it in. It was all strategic, obviously, so they could get back around to it. Now, one thing that I never came across was, um, let's say there was a certain group that stored something somewhere in like an underground type of cavern, I guess, if you will. We can call them caves or buried, whatever. If they actually shared that knowledge with other groups that were out doing the same exact thing, because I never really came across where there was like a brotherhood, like there was a brotherhood on the ship, right? But yet
yeah,
I never really came across anything that I studied where there was a brotherhood. I mean, there was a respect and an understanding, but between two different groups that were out doing the same thing. But I don't know that there was actually any type of brotherhood where like they saw each other on the water and they pulled up alongside each other and had those types of conversations. So I think they probably also, even though there was, a respect there, I think that there was probably a fear that another group would come in and actually take what they had taken, because that's
yeah,
actually how they lived their lives. I mean, that's how they survived. So when I say live their lives, it's better to say that's how they survived, because living your life,
right.
that's people can live lives in different ways, but survival is completely different. So I
Yeah,
don't know if I
absolutely.
answered your question, or if I went off the deep end, which I tend to do, and pun completely intended when I say going off the deep end.
No, I think you did. I think with the Viking communities are really interesting because they really did prize family. The equality between men and women was there to a great extent, which
Mhm.
was I think one of the first communities throughout history where that was actually a thing, where you had women that were warriors, you had men that were warriors but cared for the family, which is really interesting dynamic. So it's interesting that dynamic didn't seem to extend further than that, like you were talking about
Mhm.
with this idea of a brotherhood, is that they were moving maybe like treasure and whatnot from place to place. You talk a lot in the book about silver as well, like specifically silver, and not even so much as a treasure, but almost like an energy,
Mhm.
which I find it was really fascinating. It's a really powerful metaphor. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, in my research, like silver kept coming up. It kept coming up, and it seemed like it was in every story, which would make sense. But I think that there was like when let's say just an individual had a piece of silver, a king, a queen, whatever. For them, it was just like, okay, this is silver, where they saw it as this was power. This gave authority. This because they had something that somebody else wanted, where they kind of went out on their own because what they wanted wasn't available to them.
Right.
There wasn't going to be enough to get to them. So they really saw it not just as in like, hey, I can take this, I can spend this, I can be rich, but they saw it as power. They didn't just see it as survival. They also saw it at that next level that it created uh, I don't wanna say a wealth vision for them, but it gave them again, a power and a level that they didn't originally have, and
Right.
it people wanted what they had, and then so I think for me, it just kept coming up, so I really see that they saw it as more of like a even though they used it to buy goods and different things, but more as a, symbolic power as in this it's kinda like somebody who's never really had anything in their lives, and then they win the lottery. It's
Right.
like a lot of money, but it's also symbolic and to where they were and where they don't wanna go back.
Well, and the material side of the Vikings too is so tied into how they were motivated spiritually, how they saw the afterlife, the idea of being honored in Valhalla after they passed away, preferably in battle, preferably for something that was greater than them, which is something that I always found really honorable. But the idea that they would take those things with them, like here in the Western cultures, we're very much about well, we're just going to leave everything behind anyway, and we just move on as energy, so on
Mhm.
and so forth. Where with the Vikings, it was a little more materialistic. Those things, like the silver, like that treasure, was supposed to elevate them further once they passed also, which was to me is just really interesting because that's something I don't know whether that necessarily translated to current culture, but it was an elevation of status, not only with them as living people and as Viking chieftains and so on and so forth, but also once they passed away as well, which I found is really fascinating.
Well, the silver became part of their identity as well,
Yeah.
and because, again, it's kinda like when they went from here to here, they became I mean, who they were was kind of, in a way, cast away. It was kind of thrown off, and it was kind of motivation to get to where they were at. So I believe that it also became part of their identity and who they were, and to a certain degree, not to the fact that they're like, hey, look, we've got all this money. It was more as in like, hey, look, we aren't the government. We aren't this hierarchy and we have this.
Mm.
So I feel like it became again part of their identity over the years, and it really kind of spoke to them. Like nowadays, if somebody's driving a really expensive car, it's kind of like their identity. Their jobs, people's jobs nowadays actually become their identities.
Very much
And
so.
so I really think that the silver really became part of who they were, and to be able to say, "Hey, I've got this. Try to take it," type of thing. And I think that really in a brave way, kind of set them at a level again that they were never at before, and in a brave and courageous way, I should say.
That's really interesting distinction that you just made, that it was about, look at us, we have these things, but we're not the government either. That's a very interesting distinction to make, because usually when we think about, especially in the West and whatnot, when we think about, overarching powers, we think of people who have overarching powers over the commoner people or the citizens of a place and whatnot. And that to me is very interesting, that it was like, look, here's what we have, but we are not your government. That's very intriguing.
Well, and I also think that that was something that they projected to, because part of it was also I talk about it a lot in the book. It's about also creating followers. So by having followers, they were growing bigger, their communities were growing bigger, and again, it brought over, again, from that. Okay, we don't have a whole lot to look at what we have. And because of that, it also brought authority in, where there were people that were just kind of up and down, maybe being abused, maybe couldn't find work. So they found a a gateway, I guess, to a life that actually felt like it had some meaning to it. Because I also think back then too, I mean, again, it was like you either had something or you didn't. There
Yeah.
was like middle class, but again, a lot of individuals that were in middle class, there were so many brothers and sisters that after it got to a certain point, there wasn't anything left for them. So I really think that it just again, it created a community in a sense. It's kind of like, if you think about it, like, even though there's drama in it, and there was drama obviously in Viking communities, there was still disputes in it, but they were settled fairly. But it's like with any group, it's you talk about like the paranormal group, you talk about cryptid groups, this and that. There is a group of community, a community group of people that do care about each other and will take care of each other. You do have that, those off and on now and then. You've got this drama that pops up here and there. I personally think the Vikings handled it better than a lot of people nowadays
Completely.
handle handle disputes. But again, I really feel like it was part of their identity, and again, that brotherhood. And you'd mentioned something earlier too that I actually wanted to go back to. From what I've researched, so we look at, in how I always saw, let's say, Vikings or pirates prior to writing this book, as in they're pillaging and raping the women and all this and that. The more I read, the more they're showing more respect for women
Yeah.
than the rest of, like, let's say, the government or all these other groups. I don't know.
Absolutely.
It's like they were, and they were treated fairly. And again, I don't think the pirate and the Viking actually gets the credit that they deserve in
Yeah.
that aspect, because again, every time I would think about a Viking, we think about pirates, we think about them stealing, killing, taking everybody's women, this and that, and making them slaves. But the more you read, the more you realize, like, if they were treated well, like they were fed, they were treated better than the original government that they were working for on those naval ships. They were treated, the women were treated better than these men were treated working on these naval ships. So
Yeah.
again, the more I was reading about them and researching them, the more I was like, wait a minute, I really like these guys. These aren't just something from the past. This is something that we could probably even learn from nowadays. Like, obviously, I'm sure they were a lot rougher and a lot ruder than I would be right now around a woman. But at the same time, they showed respect. They still showed respect. And that really, and I hate to say it in this way, but it caught me off guard, because that's not what we're used to seeing in the movies and Hollywood and what we hear.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think we've, just as society, we painted a picture of them that is grossly off base. And that's the important thing, I think, about what your book goes into is, you're touching on a lot of the dark things that were going on with the Vikings and whatnot, but that happens in every society. There's
Hmm.
not one culture that's out there that doesn't have that side.
Yeah.
Like you talk about the slave trade and in that regard there, that was also going on in many other cultures around that time and after that time. It's just, I think the Norse almost get depicted to me as this sort of brutish, big, dumb beast
Mhm.
culture, which is just so far off base. One of the things that I really loved about their portrayal in films like The 13th Warrior was their ability to dedicate themselves and live in the moment, because they believed the end of the world was coming, because they believed that their fate was fixed. That Odin wrote on the slate, the old father, that as they called them, wrote on the slate of their life before they got here, from non-physical, that they were very much driven by the whole no
Yeah.
worries mentality. Like, we don't have to worry. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about the future. Don't worry. It's okay. It doesn't matter. You're not going to live a moment longer anyway. So just take a step back and live for the now. And I think it sort of bleeds into the idea. Many Marvel listeners out there will, of course, probably recognize the term Ragnarok. And the idea of the belief that the world would eventually end. Do you think that those aspects of them really shaped their relationship with the risk taking that they did?
I would say it would have had to, without a doubt, because I mean, the risks, they were taking risks, and they
Yeah.
continued to take risks, and when people caught on, they still continued to take risks. So I would say yes. Now, as people caught on, they what I thought was phenomenal was they also evolved as people caught on, and as people continued. And I want to actually touch on, you just said something about how people kind of saw him as kind of maybe like big, brutish, and dumb, and I'll be one of the first people to say, yeah, I kind of felt that same way at
Right.
first. And
Yeah.
but then when you realize, like, they were able to change direction, change strategic plan and execution of what they were doing, all pre-GPS, all pre-social media, all pre-telephones, all pre-everything. These were intelligent individuals that were able to pull these things off, and as other communities caught on to how they were rating and what they were doing, they were smart enough to catch on to that and regroup and come up with different ways to actually follow through in doing it. And again, I can't do, I mean, there was a time where I could drive anywhere using a Jamapco. I can't get anywhere now without a GPS.
Right.
And you
Yeah.
think back to then, again, all these luxuries that we have now, right? They didn't have those then, but they were still able to foresee what was coming, what was happening, see how things were changing, like on a raid that maybe didn't go. And this was something I thought was huge, and I really want to point out, if they did a raid and they saw something that did not go as planned, they weren't bullheaded and said, "Okay, well, fine, we're still gonna do it the same way they were doing it." They learned from it, and by learning from it, they were able to continue to do what they needed to do. Obviously, it got to a point where, again, I mean, everybody knew they were coming. So, like it says in the book, they started staging people. So they had people ready. People were actually paid watching for this. So when they showed up, but when that took place, what did they do? They realized it and came up with another plan and started coming in different directions. So the brilliance behind what they did, having zero IT tech support in anything, it really, when you step back, it's pretty awesome. And so they went to these places, they raided places, they took money, they took goods, this and that, but they were still also going against very powerful people and very powerful communities, and they were still pulling it off. They were still making it happen, and they were still getting away. So it's a lot of, um when you think back to the fact that literally they had absolutely no way of knowing anything, that they were so smart in their surroundings and paid so close attention to detail. I mean, nothing was left unturned. If something happened, they addressed it. So that way it didn't happen again, and they made themselves better in what they needed to do in order to survive.
Yeah, they were so interconnected, I think, to both sort of that physical and non-physical side of who they
Mm,
were. Being able to just be able to look at things from a very military perspective, but they were, I think, to me, driven by so many of the Norse sagas. Like, I mean, their culture was so full of omens and dreams, and there was like supernatural warnings. There was so much going on, I think, that factored into what they were doing, giving them that boost to continue to take on these challenges. Because I think that's one thing about the Vikings that has always struck me, was the idea that I mean, they could have I mean, they could have just it would have been easier to sit at home, right? Like, it just
mhm,
would have been easier to sit at home, and here they were planning, you know, going into places like Ireland, going into places, overseas, traveling as far as they did, not knowing if there was even gonna be anything on the other end. I
mhm.
mean, it was basically, at that point in time, it was a death sentence, and they didn't see it like that. They saw it very, very differently. Do you think that these warriors, and the people that took on these tasks were that deeply influenced by those signs? Like, looking at stuff that maybe we would look at nowadays as uh either supernatural or paranormal or whatever, and really taking those things seriously, because that's definitely how I feel when I look at what they're doing.
Mm. Well, I believe, or from what I've read and what I've researched, that again, kind of going back to what I was saying before, like there wasn't like they really didn't have an identity. They didn't have a place. So I think when
Yeah.
they ended up getting around these individuals, I think their direction, and I think it was probably contagious,
Yeah.
and they were able to pick up on that and then understand. I think also their time together, because when we think about them being out on the sea, I mean, we think of like these cruise ships, we think about different things like that.
Right.
Well, that wasn't that wasn't the case. They were there for weeks and weeks
Yeah.
together. So I think that they kind of spiritually kind of became one entity among
Yeah.
hundreds of them. So
Yeah.
I think that again, a lot of identity came from them having a name prior, but nothing to set anything on. And here they had something where they found an identity, and they also, like, here's the other thing too. This is huge. Don't miss this. They found freaking meaning, right?
Yeah.
Meaning is huge. If we don't
Yeah.
have any type of meaning in what we do, and we don't even get that a boy or that a girl, I mean, life really sucks. I
Yeah.
think that was part of their spirituality, is like they found so much meaning in what they were doing, and they
Yeah.
saw the good in it and what they could actually do and what they were doing with each other, where they saw, again, there was still hierarchy, right? But they built a different type of hierarchy. They built one where there was understanding, there was listening, and if somebody got hurt, they took care of the person. Now,
Yeah.
if the person turned on them, obviously that was a different story. But I mean, if they're going to turn on if they're going to turn on their own, that's kind of nuts, because at that point in time you have nowhere to go.
Yeah, and
So
I mean, it
you either have,
really, who's gonna mess with that at that point?
yeah, 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 definitely. And what I thought was kind of funny was certain sections where when they had people, prisoners, and this was more on the pirate end than the Vikings, but when they took over a ship and the people that didn't cooperate, they'd find land somewhere, no matter where it was, and just drop them off there, and then just wave to them as they're leaving. Like they didn't
"We're
even
gonna pull this boat over if you don't be
yeah,
quiet in the back."
e
Yeah.
exactly, and they didn't know what was there. They
Yeah.
found land, dropped them off there, and said, "Bye, see you later." It's
Yeah.
like they didn't, and they could have been. I mean, did they obviously kill some? Yes, they absolutely did.
Yeah.
But it kind of blew my mind and made me kind of laugh inside when I'm like, they literally went, okay, saw land, pulled him over, made him get off, and then left him there. You know how many times I've wanted to do that to people? And they actually did it. They
Yeah.
actually did it. And they did it again for good reason. There was good reason for it.
Yeah.
They didn't want to. I mean, I get it. You're a ship. There's a crew of 30 on there, and you were just taken over by 300 other men. Well, you know what? From what I understand, though, too, when they took over the ships, they still treated the people, better than they were originally treated by those same people.
Yeah.
Which that to me really resonated, really stuck with me, that they still took care of them. I mean, obviously, when they were fighting them, they killed many of them because they were trying to stay, right? They were trying to stay in control. But the ones that they kept as prisoners, they still took care of. They still fed
Yeah.
them. They still did different things. And that really, again, resonated because you look at the naval ship and the way it was ran and laid out, they even though they were part of the ship, they were treated pretty much as slaves. And if they got hurt, well, hey, you better make sure you heal. It's like
Yeah.
they were better to their captives than the captives were to them.
To them, yeah. Like, I think, I wonder if it had something to do with their cosmology, because Viking cosmology really did see everybody as interconnected. Like, even though,
Mhm.
like you were saying before, they didn't have necessarily that kind of like brotherhood connection between different maybe warring groups or war bands or whatever, but there's a lot of detail in their cosmology describing a universe that was bound together by basically what was like a world tree. And, and I wonder if that's why they saw distant lands the way they saw distant lands, is that sort of a concept of oneness that we talk about now in our different spiritual cultures and different religions and so on and so forth. Here you've got a group of which were predominantly pagan and had often what they felt was familial ties to the gods. Like, that was really where
Mhm.
they drew their power from. They drew their sense of belonging from. Like, all of that, just it was sort of tied back into their spirituality. What do you think about that? The idea that maybe that's why they were treating people the way they were treating them when it came to those types of situations. I mean, we all know that they were a menace
Yeah, sure.
in many places, but in these certain circumstances that we're talking about, like, I don't know, what do you think about that? Maybe that worldview is kind of what we're seeing translated.
Mhm. Well, I think, and again, it's thinking in more of an opinion. I think that everything that they were was they wanted to, how do I say it? They wanted to be better. Like they wanted to be better, and I still think that they had hearts. Obviously, they wanted to be better than what they were seeing. So I don't believe it was just necessarily, okay, we are just going after, we're getting revenge, we're doing this. I don't see it as that. Again, I go back to the whole thing where I believe it was all about survival. And I really think that they kind of lost my train of thought. Um
That's okay. I could ask you another question if you want.
Yeah. I just think that they wanted to be better than
Yeah.
why they wanted to be better than the reason they became who they were.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense, and I think that's such an important distinction and driving force, because we even look around at various cultures and stuff today, and we don't see that mentality even in certain people, like certain people that I know that don't have that mentality, that they
Yeah.
get up every day and do the same thing every day until the end, and it's everybody else's fault. I think that idea of ownership and responsibility and all of those things are definitely things that we can take away from who these people were at their core. Like, if we had a society that was functioning on a macrocosm level of if we can just be better than we were yesterday. That's a massive mental shift that we don't see a lot of nowadays.
So kind of like a responsibility to be better than they were the day
Yeah.
before and better than where they came from and the
Yeah.
people that put them where they originally were.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the victim mentality that we see in so many people today. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got a lot of
Mhm.
finger pointing, we've got a lot of blaming, we've got,
Yeah.
if these people hadn't have done this to me, then I wouldn't be that way, or these people hadn't done this to my people, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of victim blaming and finger pointing here. When at the end of the day, I firmly believe that that attitude, that the Viking attitude, is something that we can take away from, because like that takes a certain type of mentality to be able to look in the mirror and do that. And they didn't even have mirrors at that point. So
Yeah. And they it was really what they did, even though it was breaking laws, but it was also laws that were keeping them down. They really they were celebrating who they were and what they were doing and how they were, again, in a lot of ways, a lot more fair, even though they were raiding villages and they people did die, innocent people woken up in the middle of the night, somebody's in their house and they trying to get to stuff. They still tried to be better than than the next person. Now, and the other thing that I kind of picked up on, and I feel was they raided understanding that they were going to be confronted in many different ways. But I don't believe their intent was, I think if somebody put their arms down and was just like, "Take it," from what I'm getting after all this reading I've done and everything on it, I'm thinking they probably wouldn't have killed them. They
yeah,
probably would have taken the items, because in reality, I've picked up, like, I kind of like the places that they did raid, because some of them were just they some areas weren't overly rich, if you will. I think they saw themselves in some of those people when they went there and did some of those raids. So I think a lot of the death that happened was just people trying to defend themselves
sure.
against this horde of individuals coming in. But I the more I read, the more even though I know the cover of my book looks really, really vicious, I believe that there were times where that did take place. But
Yeah.
I really think in many cases, if people were just like, "Please don't hurt my family, take what you want," they probably would have they would have been fine, and they might have even been like, "Okay, I'm not gonna take anything here," you know?
Yeah.
Or just take a little bit to go out, and I really believe that, and I never thought I'd ever say this in my lifetime, but, like, pirates and Vikings actually would have, um, even though they were doing what they were doing, they were really doing a lot of the right things, like, they were the real, uh, Robin Hoods, I guess, in a sense, but as a group instead of just, one individual.
That's really interesting. I mean, yeah, and I mean, I definitely wanna, like, emphasize the fact that there were a lot of horrible things that were going on, during that time period, and, especially today with the modern day pirates and stuff like that. I mean, they're terrifying. I mean, I think most people
Yeah.
saw the movie Captain Phillip, and whatnot. I don't think I don't wanna, like, make this sound like we're romanticizing it in any way, shape, or
Sure,
form,
sure.
because it can be horrific, and
Mhm.
but at the same time, there was, like you're saying, there's elements of governing and stuff like that that came out of this, and came out of, the these different areas of their culture that were so far ahead, and things that we still use today, like health insurance, came out
Mhm,
of pirates, and whatnot. Like, if they hadn't have been practicing that, we probably wouldn't have it.
mhm.
So there's certain things that came out which I found really, really interesting. And so talking about the idea of these sort of romantic images that we have, about them, I think a lot of people are curious about images that we recognize that are featured quite a bit in movies, like of the Berserker warriors, who, and for those who don't know, but the Berserker warriors they were a certain group within the Viking community. They were warriors that would fight, but they would get themselves into a trance. It was like a almost like a trance mediumship. Sometimes I think they would use substances and whatnot, but they were known to fight with no armor, nothing. And people were terrified of these guys because they were absolutely bananas. Like they would go into a raid, no battle armor, no nothing, and they would just it was like they just didn't even feel pain anymore. So a lot of these stories that we hear about them, how much do you think are romanticized, and how do historians differentiate between these types of archetypes and stories and the real thing? How did you do it, for that matter?
Well, I originally went into it with the understanding of what a lot of people see these individuals as. And, but that's also part of researching and
Mm-hmm.
reading and understanding and kind of just, I mean, I didn't necessarily, I don't want to say I went in with it with like a headstrong idea of what I thought. Um, but I think at the end of the day, it's, I mean, I I think with some people, like for me, like I could really make the book really gruesome, right? To try to sell more books. Um,
And easy to
but
do with this subject.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, there was some brutality in the book that I wrote, but you'll also notice I didn't necessarily like a lot of other writers. I didn't necessarily glorify it either,
Yeah.
because it's kind of a for a lot of people, it's the first thought, right? That they have in their head that this is what it is. But there was so much more to what they did, and so that's kind of why, again, in the book, there's some brutal aspects in there. But if you notice, again, it wasn't like it wasn't glorified brutality. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't glorify it. It was in there as in, like, this was part of what did happen, but it was more focused on who they were, why they were doing what they were doing, and how they did it. So I know that that could make it so people don't necessarily wanna buy the book because, again, it's not full of graphic violence. However, there is a lot of brutality in there for some people that like that brutality aspect of it, but it's written more, and I think I'd mentioned this to you, as if you're watching a documentary, not you're
Yeah.
reading a book and you're reading stories. So, a lot of what I've been doing with the writings that I've been doing now is, instead of like paragraphs, I've been putting it like, again, like it's a documentary. It's laid out in documentary form
Right.
because I really wanted to focus on, obviously not ignore the fact of there was a lot of brutality. There were some horrible things that happened, but it wasn't just these were just rogue people that just hated everybody. That wasn't what it was about. That's not how
Yeah.
it started. It started for a certain reason. And so for me, I don't feel like I personally romanticized it. Although I almost did in many aspects, and then I kept kind of stopping myself because,
Yeah.
again, what let's talk, I mean, you've written books. Let's talk about what sells. People wanna be on the edge, right? People
Sure.
wanna do this and that, and so I took a real chance with this book. Again, there's brutality in there, but the main focus of the book is the reasons behind, and not to say, "Okay,
Yeah.
this is what made it right," but this is what you would not normally know by just seeing a picture of a pirate, or seeing a picture of a Viking, or maybe watching a movie, or something like that. This is
Yeah.
stuff that you wouldn't normally understand, that these guys weren't just beasts. These people weren't just monsters. There was something that created that monster that was in them, but they were still at the same time very, very human.
Well, it's like that quote from Jordan Peterson, is that the typically good men can be dangerous, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's is so true. It applies to this a lot. It's the dangerous men that can tame that
Mhm.
and be good men, and that's where the virtue comes from. And it's really interesting when you apply it so literally to people like the Viking culture. And when we look too at their belief systems into the supernatural, you see it even there. Like their I don't know if you're familiar with the creatures, the Draugrs,
Mm.
so that was always a really interesting take on a Viking take on the vampire, which was one of the original
Okay.
vampires. Um, and I'll tell this to people listening because it's worth researching. One of the first vampires, one of the first versions of the vampire came out of the Viking culture, and they were called the Draugr, and it was probably one of the most terrifying types of vampire. And if anybody saw Nosferatu, the new version of Nosferatu, Count Orlok was very similar to the look of the Draugr. He was just this rotting corpse that was
Mhm.
just vicious and malicious and just terrible. And so there was no like sparkly anything. There was no sparkly
Yeah.
vampires with the Vikings. There was none of that. And when you had they had a deep understanding of things like witchcraft, cursed treasures, like haunted burial mounds, like all of those types of things were very prevalent within their culture. But even in the creatures and the monsters, the cryptids that they saw or believed in, or, wherever you kind of fall in that category, you could see that dynamic going on, that kind of like terrifying, but yet mysterious, but yet fascinating. I mean, like even their belief systems in regards to what they were experiencing, what was driving them supernaturally, what really reflected that that dichotomy of dangerous versus virtuous. So yeah, it just really interesting. But anyway, this was so fascinating. I can't wait for people to read this because it is so unique. It's going to give you a different perspective on the Viking people. At least I hope so. Anyway, I hope it gives people
Yeah.
a different glimpse into this because it's one of those it's one of those subjects that drive so much of what we do today. We don't think about, like, we really don't think about that, like things like healthcare and stuff like that they had that. Yeah. So I tell people where they can get it, when the book's going to be out, all of it.
Sure. Yeah. It'll obviously be available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the online retailers. There will be some brick and mortar locations that it'll be at, but as of right now, it is due to release. Let me see. I believe the end of June, right around the end of June. So it's with a publisher right now. It's pretty much done. But I have actually multiple books that are actually releasing this year because I had a bunch of them kind of on the back burner,
That's
and
awesome.
I kind of went to town. I said, you know what, I'm going to finish these, and then I found this. I love documentaries. I just love documentaries, and I found this style that I enjoyed, and I was actually able to bring that to these other ones that I was sitting on because I was just like, "There's something missing. It's not how I
Right.
want it to be." And, so I am just so excited about this documentary, Dateline type of unsolved mysteries style, of writing. Again, and you'll notice in the book, there are on the page, it might have 200 words maybe,
Yeah.
if that, and one of the lines might have 3 words in it because again, it's as if I'm kinda, like, talking to you about it in a documentary form. So, so that's kind of I jumped on that. I'm like, "That's what I wanna do that with all these books here because 'cause I've got a true crime
Yeah.
series coming out as well this year." So, I have a total of, like, 6 books coming out this year, and I am just, like, freaking so excited about it.
Well, and it makes it a little
So
bit of a lighter read too for people that are afraid they're going to get bogged down in too much
yeah,
history, because that's the one thing
and
with
that's this
history
guy
books.
right here.
Right? Yeah, yeah, like, yeah, that's the one thing I think people think about history books, and they're like, "I don't wanna go back to school for this. I just wanna read something cool and interesting." And that's the nice thing about this format, is that it's just cool and interesting, and it's not going to weigh you down. It's not going to make you feel like you're sitting back at a desk somewhere. It is a little bit more of like a visual read for people, which is really cool.
Well, I'm more of I always tell people this in the cryptid world, people tend to get all upset about it, but I am not an educator in these subjects. I mean, if you read something that I write and you pick something up from it, great. Everything that I write and what I do, I want to entertain people. I do it to
Yeah,
entertain. Like I don't put fluff in it. I don't fake anything, but I want it to be entertaining to the reader. There are people out there that are educators in a sense, and they can go up and when they speak, it's educational. You pick up their book, you read it, it's kind of educational. I don't want that because number one, that's not me. So again, how do I take something that is going to be not they can take something away from it, but also be entertained at the
yeah,
same time. And again, like if I'm that guy and I pick up that book and it's like this thick, I put it back down. I'm like, I'm never going to get through that. I'm just
right.
never going to get through it. So, but if I open it up and I look and it's laid out in a documentary type of format, I'm just like, wow, wait a minute, and it's kind of laid out in academic format too, which again, I'm not an educator, although I wanted people to be able to take something away from it. But again, first and foremost, I'm an educator, not an educator, entertainer. And
Yeah.
then if somebody picks something up out of something that I write, fantastic. But I want people to be happy with what they're reading and put it down and not be like, oh, that was boring. Put it down, and go, oh, that was entertaining.
Yeah, yeah, that's always been a bit of my approach as well, even though I'm heavily in the academic side. But my theater background has always been something that I've brought to the table because I think when you've got people emotionally engaged in some way, then that is when people end up learning more. I think you can't negate that aspect of it. You have to be able to keep people entertained. It has to be something that people are emotionally engaged in, because otherwise, it just becomes a book and they're going to forget about it in 5 minutes after they put it down. And so
Yeah.
I agree. I think there's a balance to be had that's about bringing factual information in a really fun, unique way, and that's what sticks with people. People often remember how they felt about something and won't remember one fact that they've picked up. So
Yeah.
it's like
Sure.
you've
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, you gotta entertain the two. So thank you so much for this conversation. This was so
Yeah.
fun and interesting, and I can't wait for people to read this.
Yeah. No, I'm excited about it. And again, thank you for stepping in and um, reading it and putting the forward to it. Like I said,
My
I mean,
pleasure.
out of everybody, anybody that I could have reached out to, I mean, out of, I mean, what are the chances? What are the
Yeah.
chances? And when you'd said that, I was just like, oh, I'm looking for somebody for that. And I was hoping you were going to come back and say, oh, I'd love to do that, which is exactly what you did.
Yeah.
So, but then I was like, okay, well, let me send it to you too, because I actually I've had multiple people ask me, hey, can you write a forward for my book? I'm like, oh yeah. And I'm like, well, we'll send it to me. And then I'm like, I can't write a forward for that book.
Oh, no.
You got to go back to the drawing board on that. That's a
Yeah.
little regardless of whether my anything I've written in the past has done really well. If somebody's writing a forward for me, I'm always like, okay, I know you appreciate my work, you like my work, but just read what you're putting your name on.
Funny.
And if you still want to after that, let me know. Because like I said, there was a couple people. I mean, I've written introductions for people, different things like that, but a forward is really an endorsement saying, hey,
Yeah.
yes, I'm checking off on this. I back this right here. It's just like a publisher saying, "Hey, yeah, I'm backing this. I'm putting risk on this." So I really want people to know what it is that they're doing. And so for the true crime series that's rolling out this year as well, there's some pretty awesome people that read some of them, and they're I know Chad Lewis, right?
Very well, yes.
Yeah. I love Chad. Chad actually is writing the forward for the Halloween true crime that's going to
Fantastic.
be out. and that's coming out in April. So I was excited about that, and I know he loves Halloween, and I've just had some amazing conversations with him. So he's right in the forward for that.
He's a dear friend of mine. I adore Chad. So you've picked
You
well.
can't not. How can anybody not like Chad Lewis?
Yeah. Seriously. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Thank
we
you.
will do it again.
All right. Sounds good.
Well, that was an absolutely incredible conversation about these amazing people. And for those of you out there who are part of the Nordic group of people out there, whether you're Swedish or Norwegian like me, or Icelandic or whichever, you can't help but just go back on so much of what we've learned from this culture, from these people, as horrendous and as terrible as some of the events that happened were. There was so much to take away from them that we can really look at and I think apply to our daily life, even nowadays. As I said, even that down to the idea that they were very much about living in the moment and letting go of fear, and a lot of the things that we talk about here on Supernatural Circumstances. But Kenney's put a lot into this book, and it's very interesting. It's very exciting to read about some of the incredible people that has graced the history books in the world of the Viking culture. It's very interesting, and we talked a little bit about some of their spirituality and stuff like that on the show today, but there's so much more. When we think of Vikings, we often think of characters like Odin and Thor and Loki and all these various characters that have come up throughout the years that have been made really famous by Marvel and other films that have been out there. But I highly recommend anybody that wants to take a continuous and fascinating look into Viking history is to watch the movie The 13th Warrior. Now, this movie came out, I believe it was the early 2000s, and it starred Antonio Banderas, and he played a fellow who was he was a Middle Eastern fellow who was thrown out of his homeland, essentially, and he ended up on sort of an ambassador type expedition out into the middle of nowhere. And what does he come across but this Viking establishment who has just gotten a new chieftain named Bullify, and he doesn't speak the language, nothing. He doesn't know these people, and he ends up on a journey with them to another Viking settlement that is being attacked and belabored by this group of they're like a tribe of people they're cannibals, they're vicious, and you almost get the sense that they have this kind of like spiritual element to them. But the lessons that he learns along the way from the Vikings, who he initially sees as exactly how Kenney described, like these big, brutish, don't know anything, bad hygiene, just low to the earth people is how he sees them coming into the settlement. And by the end of the journey, ends up finding that they have so much in common, and how much he admires this group of people by the end of the story. The original book is called Eaters of the Dead, but I'm telling you, it is an absolutely fantastic film. And if you want to sort of get a sense of what Kenney and I were talking about today, I highly recommend that you could go and download this movie. It's on YouTube. Please go watch it. It's really phenomenal, and it's got that air of supernatural as well, which is, to me, is just awesome. So thank you, all of you, for joining me on this eerie and exciting and fascinating expedition, my dear listeners. And remember, there is no line between the natural and the supernatural. All is consciousness. Until next time, stay curious, friends. Supernatural Circumstances is a co-production of Entity Seeker, Paranormal Research and Teachings, and the 20th Plane. This podcast is a part of the Curious Cast podcast network. You can find out more about me, Morgan Knudsen, and book me for live appearances at entityseeker.ca. You can also email the show at supernaturalcircumstances.com.